It was an orangutan in Vietnam at a place called Dam Sen Amusement Park, where there was nothing amusing about Dam Sen, I can tell you that much. And this was a large male orangutan, and he was kept in a 4 by 5 meter glass enclosure. And there were just 2 boulders that were attached to the floor, and he would just cower behind these 2 boulders. And people would come and they would knock on the glass, they would taunt him with food, they would scream at him. And you could just see he was terrified, he was stressed, and he was just a broken spirit. And I remember at one point he came and he walked towards the window, and this was when all the tourists had left, and he had his head pressed up against the window. And I went and I pressed my head up against his, and we just had this moment where it was probably only a few minutes, but I just felt that there was this connection there, that he almost knew that I was there to try and help him. And that was a really pivotal moment for me, and that kick-started this multi-year investigation into the orangutan tourism industry, culminating in a documentary called Eyes of the Orangutan, which is currently being shown on National Geographic. So I would say if anyone is interested in watching that, hopefully it's still being shown on Nat Geo.
There is a term in, at least here in the Philippines, local filmmaking, wherein for shock value, you basically turn to poverty porn and basically sell that to Western audiences. Is that the way that you deal with the emotions that come about with your coverage?
Yeah, I mean, I think my soul has withered into a small black mess. My heart is a beating and dying ember. I mean, I joke, but of course this industry does take a real toll on you. I mean, it's I have suffered for this profession, physically and emotionally. It does get easier the longer you do it, because I think almost like with war correspondence, you do become desensitized, which isn't necessarily a good thing. But I have become so used to animal suffering now. I think there's probably not many people on Earth who have seen the sheer variety and sheer scope of animal abuse that I have. So yeah, a lot of the time when you're on location, you're so focused on taking your shots, and you're seeing everything almost in the abstract. You look at things as you look in colors, you look at composition, you look at your lighting. You're so focused on trying to tell that story that you are not actually absorbing.
You take a look at the filmmaking perspective of your career. What are you trying to do with it? How does that turn into a call to action somewhat in the way that you present it?
So I think that filmmaking really does have a role to play in helping to spread the word about what is happening to animals. It's just we have to be very careful about how we package it.
Yeah.
So I would say it's kind of subliminal education. Mm-hmm. So you're not hitting people over the head with it. You're not saying the world is all doom and gloom, and you're not talking about these really depressing conservation stories. So for example, I'll give you another example. So I've been working on this project called Dethroned for the last 3 or 4 years. And it's a story about mankind's relationship with big cats, how big cats have gone from being worshipped, respected, and revered to being commodified, to being targeted for their body parts, to being kept in cages. So the way that we try and package this to people is that this is really a story about our relationship with big cats. It's not about the threats facing these animals, because ultimately then people might not watch our films.
You put it in perspective that the ancients would look at them as these mythical figures, and all of a sudden they're now figurines instead.
Yes.
So
yeah, exactly. Well, that's something that we face with conservation films, that most of the time, within the first 30 seconds of watching a film about conservation, you almost know what the film is going to be about.
You take a look at all of that in the context of the Philippines and the Philippine tourism. Just what have you observed when seeing coral forests that are still relatively healthy compared to those that are not, those that have been bleached? Like, what are your experiences around that?
So we are quite lucky here in the Philippines, is that there are still incredibly healthy reefs that people can experience. Because when you go to a reef that has been impacted by bleaching, it's absolutely haunting. It's like a coral graveyard. So I think it's now 75% of coral reefs around the world are experiencing some kind of bleaching. And this has huge knock-on implications, not just for marine lives, but also for the communities that depend upon them.